Hi, it's time for a video about external audio connections. The other day I received an email from a fellow named Jim, and this is what Jim asks. He says, I'm trying to figure out how much voltage is needed to drive a decent level of sound through the phono jack of my early 60s model 2015-2016. I'm going to hook up a car Bluetooth receiver and I'm trying to figure out how much voltage out I need from that device to get decent volume. I know phono inputs are a bit different from auxiliary inputs. Anything you can share. Really want to avoid any work behind the faceplate if I can. Many thanks in advance, Jim. That's a very good and reasonable question. Now, I was fairly sure that I knew what the answer should be, but I don't like to give out advice or answers, especially for technical questions like this, unless I know for a fact that I'm steering Jim in the right direction here. So I decided to do a little setup to see if my theory about his question was correct or not. Here's our setup. We have a simple little Bluetooth receiver. This is a Maston WM4U. This is one that I've reviewed on our playlist about audio jacks and Bluetooth receivers. This is not the most recent one, but this is one I had in my desk drawer, so that's what I chose to use. It's a good little one. You can buy them on Amazon. They're around 20 bucks, so it's pretty reasonably priced. All I did was I made up a little audio jack right here. This is the same audio jack that we use on our external audio jack assemblies that we send out to people. So I just soldered some wires to it. We have the negative lead here and then the stereo right and left channel here. Since Jim's intercom, like all intercoms, are monaural systems, I have the outputs right and left bound together here into a single connection, and I have it connected to my oscilloscope. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when we play music. Oh, and then we have my phone. I'm just going to choose a song randomly, and we can watch the oscilloscope, and you can see what the result of this sort of setup is. For those of you who are not familiar with the way this works, the Bluetooth receiver is like all Bluetooth devices. I've already paired it with my phone, and when I play music on my phone, it will send the signals over Bluetooth to the receiver, and that will come out of the output jack on it and then feed into the audio jack. If this was hooked to an amplifier or your intercom system, it would play through the intercom system. In this case, we're just playing the signal into the oscilloscope so we can see what it says. All right, you're looking at the screen of my Rigel DS2202A oscilloscope, and that's what's connected to the audio jack that's connected to the Bluetooth receiver. And if I go ahead and turn a song on my phone, what you're going to see is a typical waveform signature of a song playing from your phone. This is the kind of waveform that you would see on any song if you hook up an oscilloscope to an audio source. It's an AC signal. You can see there's a center dot right here that doesn't move, and then you have all of these jaggedy waveforms that come off of either side. They all jump around, and this just shows that the music is playing, and that's what you would expect to see. Now, if we need to measure the voltage of the signal coming out of the Bluetooth receiver, which is the goal of this setup, this doesn't work, because this type of signal is jumping all over the place, and the oscilloscope can't measure it, I can't measure it, it's too random, and it's all over the shop. So what we need to do is we need to change the type of signal that we're feeding into it so we can have a signal that we can actually measure. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it the modern, cheap, easy way. We need a signal from a device like my phone that can transmit it over Bluetooth to the receiver. I have all kinds of audio signal generators in the shop, but they don't have Bluetooth built into them, and I'm not going to go through all the giant setup to do this. What we're going to do is, I did what most people would do in this case. I downloaded an app, because that's what apps are for. And which app did I download? I don't know. It was some free app called Frequency Generator. It was the first one that came up in the Google Play Store. It doesn't really matter, because when I get done doing this, I'm going to delete it anyway, and it was free. And free is always good. So what we have, how I have it set up here is, it's a fairly standard test frequency. It's 1000 hertz. It will play a sine wave. And the reason we're going to play a sine wave is a waveform that you can actually measure, and the oscilloscope will tell us the level of the voltage output or the input that it's receiving from the Bluetooth receiver. So I'm just going to press play, and then it will turn on and we can measure our waveform. So let's go ahead and press play. And there's our waveform. And that's the nice thing about a sine wave. A sine wave is a nice uniform shape. It's not all jaggedy and jumping all over the place. It's a waveform that easily can be measured. Even though this app was free, I think you probably can see up here is the little hardware frequency counter that's built into the oscilloscope, and we're supposed to have a 1 kilohertz or 1000 hertz sine wave, and it's measuring, it's 1.00034-ish. It's jumping around a little bit, but that's so many places beyond the decimal point that it doesn't really matter. Also down here you can see in the software frequency counter, it's pretty much spot on. It jumps around a little bit, but that could be the cabling and the connection in the audio jack and things like that, but it's pretty much right on the money where it should be. The other thing which is nice about an oscilloscope like this is it'll do the math for me. In the old days of oscilloscope, you would have to count the number of graticule spaces that the waveform occupies above and below center, and then you do the math and you measure it and you figure it out, and then you come up with your answer. In this particular case, because the oscilloscope is really smart, it already is set up and it's telling me that we have 264 millivolts peak to peak. That means between the top here and the bottom here, we have a little bit more than 1/4 of 1 volt, which is outstanding. Prove out my hypothesis of how I thought this would go to be able to answer Jim's question right now. And for any of you that use your phone with a Bluetooth device, you know that there's a volume level setting on your phone of how loud you want the Bluetooth music to be. And right now my phone is set at maximum, and if you have a newer phone like I do, it has one of those little warning things that pops up if you go over like 3/4 of the total volume, warning you that listening to high volumes is bad for your hearing. So are you sure you want to do that? And I said yes, because I'm a grown-up and I can decide that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly ramp down the volume on the setting on the phone, and we're going to watch and see what happens to our waveform and watch and see what happens to our voltage output measurement right here. So we'll go ahead and we'll lower this down. It's going to be sort of notch by notch because that's the way the phone is designed. And you can see our waveform is shrinking and starting to flatten out as the signal is reduced. And we're now at probably 1 step above half, and our output voltage is now about 34 millivolts. If we go down lower, it continues to decrease, and now it's starting to become somewhat unstable. The phone is turned down 3/4 of the way. Our output voltage has dropped to, it's jumping around a lot, but I would say if I average it out, it's around 14 millivolts, and will continue to go down and down. The phone is now turned down to 0. Our output voltage, we have no signal here, and it's between 8 and 10 millivolts, something like that. So if we go, and also it's lost the frequency here. The signal is so low, it can't measure the frequency. These are blank down here. But if we go ahead and turn it back up, and we just go up really fast, our signal is back. Our 1/4 of a volt, or our 268 millivolts, is back, as is our frequency, and so forth. So my hypothesis has been proven. If you adjust the volume setting in quotes, on your phone, then it adjusts the signal output from your Bluetooth receiver, feeding more or less signal into your audio device, your amplifier and or intercom system, and therefore adjusting the volume that the set can produce. So how does this answer Jim's question? What he asked was, I'm going to hook up a car Bluetooth receiver, that would be this, and trying to figure out how much voltage I need from that device to get decent volume, knowing the phono inputs are a bit different from auxiliary inputs. That's a very important point. Models like the 2011, 2012, 2015, 2016, they only have a single audio input, and I'll see if I can find a picture that shows that, and it'll be the little audio jack in the center between the two knobs. Phono inputs are different than auxiliary or line level inputs. The bit of information that Jim needs to know is your standard phonograph signal level output is typically somewhere between 2 millivolts which would be considered a very low level output, and as high as 7 millivolts, which would be considered a high level output. You need somewhere between 2 and 7 typically from the turntable or from the record player to feed into a phono input. I have a feeling that 2 to 7 millivolts on a NuTone 2015-2016 is going to be too low. Somewhere between those ratings and the 265 millivolts that we had coming out of our little Bluetooth receiver should work just fine. The real acid test on something like this is you have to actually hook it up and try it and see, because you can do all of this in theory, and in practice we know now that the signal output of the Bluetooth receiver is adjustable by the volume setting on your phone, so you do have control over it, and you certainly don't want to overdrive it. You want a low enough signal so it plays well, but not too high of a signal so it's too distorted. You also have to remember that, as with almost any audio device that has an amplifier built into it, there is what they call a volume adjustment, which is truly more of a gain adjustment. The gain adjustment adjusts how much power the amplifier is going to make with the signal that's being fed into it. There will be often a balancing act between the signal level from the inputting device, in this case the Bluetooth receiver, and the output of the intercom system, and you want to set this at a good level and adjust your gain control at a good level so it sounds the best that it possibly can. It probably will be set up somewhat differently than when you're listening to the built-in radio, but that's what happens when you have devices that were designed 60 years apart. So I hope that answers Jim's question. You can hook up a Bluetooth device to your model 2015-2016. You should have more than enough signal to feed into the master station to allow you to play the music through the house successfully. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps it'll be helpful to some of you. If it is, please give it a thumbs up. Thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.